Welcome to Shorty's SuperCoach. We are smashing through some content today, doing some pre-recording on your Monday. And we're not going to muck around today because the midfield video is often the longer one. And I feel like this year there is just a stack of mid-priced options that are just threatening to break out. And we got a few of those over the weekend in Will Day, Finn Callaghan. But I still feel like there's a couple others that are definitely in that same category. Going to go through all the players that are in over 3% of sides. That sort of a bit of a reflection that someone's thinking about them, makes them somewhat relevant. So hopefully this can be a bit of a guide for you to just go through the description. This will be time-stamped. If you're interested in a few players, you can just quickly jump through what's probably a bit of a lengthy video, but hopefully you can just quickly jump through the guys that you are interested in discussing. So first things first, Bond, he's still in 5% of sides, but we're just going to assume that 5% of people still haven't really found out the news or they haven't looked at their SuperCoach sites since December. Moving on to Butters. Well, they've reacted to Butters, so he's not in. Lachie Neale has gone up to 25% of sides, and that is definitely a bit of a response to the postponing and cancellation of the games, which should see that Brisbane-Geelong game just move to round 3, which therefore makes Neale relatively enticing because he is such a reliable option. For me, I'm probably preferring to go a little bit next gen in my midfield setup, like sort of hoping to find guys that are just at the start or just early stages of their real premium window. I mean, look at this. What a run of seasons. Just 110 plus everywhere, sprinklings of 120. So, look, I'm not going to talk you out of Lachie Neale, but he is nearly 32. He has sort of managed injuries, I feel like reasonably well over his last 18 months. Not always at his best, but finds a way. I don't know. Managing some concerns. Bit of an interrupted preseason. A shorter preseason after winning the flag. I'm happy to go elsewhere. Sort of maybe looking to pick whether it's a Nick Daicos or, someone around this stage of their premium window, just right at the start, put together a few good ones, but they've got years ahead. I mean, at some stage, Neale drops away. I'm not going to say it's definitely this year, but I feel like there's every chance that reigning premiers and their best players can start a bit slow. It's not a given, but it can happen sometimes. So that's probably my main concern, shying away from him. Now, Nick Daicos is a very interesting talking point, and I have been on a roller coaster with this guy. So he's still in 50% of teams, so not a huge response after a disappointing opening round. Now, early days of the preseason, I was like, oh, that plantar fasciitis, can we do it? Can he manage it? What's going on? Then I saw him, albeit against the Tigers, but still, physically, he looked insane. Just dominated. Seen some intra-clubs, he looked fantastic. So I thought, look, we've got to pick him. And then opening round comes by and he's cramping up and he scores 66, just 4 possessions in the second half. So I'm not saying that's to totally rule him out, but what it does do, it does place a 66 next to his name, which he's going to cop a significant drop in his price. You'd imagine he certainly goes below 600. And round 3 bye. So in essence, you're going to see him drop in price after round 2, then have a bye, and then round 5, depending if he's responded perfectly. He might still be able to boost his form back up and that price back beyond 600k. But personally, I'm almost feeling like it might be worth just going elsewhere, particularly because from a pure strategic point of view, we had Will Day, Callaghan. I'm red hot on Will Ashcroft as well. I'm just wondering, is that 130, 140, 150k that we could save even more? Could that be better spent elsewhere? Knowing that, I'm not saying Daicos is going to have a shock in 3 weeks, but what we do know is he's banked that 66, which will impact his score, impact his price, I should say. So by the time he returns from his bye, he's going to be much less than he is right now. That's a fact. Could he be a handy pickup by round 6 or 7? Perhaps. Or does he just go bonkers and we wish we never got rid of him? Also a real possibility. I'm still umming and ahhing it around that sort of decision myself. So I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. Isaac Heeney, 7% of teams, bit of a pod. I feel like there's a little bit of that vibe around Sydney players, not just with the bye, but also the fact that some shocking grand final losses, new coach. Like, how is Sydney as a whole going to respond? And probably happy to play around him. Again, I don't think he was too great in opening round. So it's not like we should define these selections by opening round. It's 1 week, But it does help us, give us a bit of an indicator. And what did he score? Okay, he scored 105 from 21 touches. Not too bad. But yeah, look, I just think there's better options. And he'll have another good year, another impressive year. But you feel like a price tag of 630 is probably top level for him. He's only had 1 year in that range. So I feel like it's a really good chance that we could pick him up for cheaper. And he's got that buy. So that's the way I'm sort of approaching that. Caleb Serong, I've only got good things to say about him. Like, he's a fella, I talk about someone like Neale, and maybe we're catching him at the end of his huge premium career. Well, I think we're catching Serong at the start. So he's not necessarily currently in my team, but he's certainly in consideration. 111, 115. He's just a fantastic player. Ball magnet, seems to be able to work so hard. He just gets through tags, does love a tackle, loves a clearance, some sort of identical numbers there from his last couple of seasons where he's really broken out. And look, he's almost the inspiration for what we're looking for from some of these other guys like an Ashcroft and that, because, okay, he averaged 90 and 22, but, some of the guys like Callaghan, Ashcroft, Day, like, this is sort of what we're hoping. We're hoping Will Day can be the last couple of years Serong. That's sort of what we're looking for in those numbers. So certainly can't fault Caleb. He's a gun, and I think you can pick him with confidence. Zach Merrett, 9%, sort of just often gets put to the side. I don't know why. I feel like it's a bit harsh on him. Look, you could pick him with absolute confidence. I mean, I feel as if it's a bit harsh, that ownership, because he has been one of the most consistent players for some time. He's not even 30 yet, and he'll just give you between 112 and 115 as an absolute guarantee. I mean, look at that, the last 5 years. You can just lock that. So I don't really feel like I need to spend too much time on him, because the proof is right there. You know exactly what you're going to get. For some reason, we're maybe not all about him, but I reckon he's a really good option. Paddy Cripps, we look at this picture of consistency from Merrett. Probably the one thing that scares me off from Cripper is that he's the opposite. Fantastic career. Don't get me wrong, but the SuperCoach scoring has really fluctuated. Even last year was a Brownlow year, 110, but look at that, 110, 97, 111, 83, 97, 117, 119, 97, 107. Like, really his whole career has ebbed and flowed, whether he's carrying an injury or using the ball a bit poorly or having the best career sort of season he's had with a 119 and a 117. So last 5 years hasn't gone over 112, just 1 year or 2 years over 110, just sneaking in last year. So I'm happy to pass on him, and I love Cripper. I really do, but I'm happy to pass on him because I just feel as if there are better, more consistent options. He seems to have been a really consistent footballer for years and years. I don't really understand why his averages have fluctuated quite drastically. I think it's often been around ball use and some injury-affected games and that, but it is quite interesting. Look at a Zach Merrett, consistent on consistent scoring. Well, yeah, Cripps, you would say, Cripps has had a better career than Merrett, but it's interesting from a SuperCoach lens how it has changed up. But just my thoughts, but there is 12% of you that are happy to go with Paddy. And I do love watching him. He is one of my favourites from way back. Jack Sinclair we touched on in the defenders, but concerned given the body, interrupted pre-season, etc. Now, Andy Brayshaw is a really interesting guy because he has been quite popular, 11% of sides, and I think people are kind of feeling, Freo potentially on the up, Serong and Young, maybe cop a bit more attention. Brayshaw's just going to do what he does. Now, I'm not going to knock him. I think he's a really consistent operator, but the one thing I'll say, so Zach Merrett, consistent between 112, 115. That's some super premium numbers. Albeit, okay, Brayshaw's 25, but is Brayshaw just consistent from 107 to 110? He had that year of 112 in 22, when 109, 110 basically. I mean, he's going to be consistent. Like, he'll give you what you need. If you're like, hey, I just need a safe guy with a good buy structure to average 110. I think you'll get that. So he's super consistent player, but I just wonder, the next guy I'll talk about, LDU, has that 115 scope, I reckon. Noah Anderson, 115 scope. Like, I just think, even Tom Green before he got injured, cheaper but could go at his best. He's 115 plus. We feel like he could. I just wonder if Brayshaw is as consistent as the day is long, but has topped out at about 110, 111, 112, which is great. Let's not disrespect it, but some guys in and around his price, I just wonder, could they go beyond him? And that probably leads me into Luke Davies-Uniacke, because he is my one of my favourites, been in my team and one of my mainstays for my midfield all pre-season. Only 6% of sides, so he's probably my biggest pod. I'm excited to start him. I just feel like it's a matter of time before we have a season where we go, wow, that was one of the most watchable, highlight-ridden seasons where he's taking a couple of bounces, kicking goals, bursting out of packs, sidestepping blokes like they're standing still. Now, we have seen it in snippets, but it's never fully come together. And that's why I think, he's coming into his prime. He's 25, he is in his prime. North Melbourne gets a little bit better. Maybe he gets a bit of help in there. I'm just feeling, gut feel, that it's going to be the year for him. Now, we saw a slow start in 22. Huge back end of the year. Huge. And I remember a lot of people being like, yeah, get on him. Got to get on him. And then he sort of had some injury concerns midway through the year after a ripper start to the year. Injury concerns, then comes back and goes berserk. Like, look at those numbers, Dan, 2023. So then again, we're like 2024. Surely he's a lock. I mean, he wasn't an actual lock, but people were talking about him. Starts relatively sluggish. Just didn't quite get going. Okay numbers till round 9. But again, had a great mid-patch here. Very capable of going 140 plus. His best is great. Don't get me wrong, he can use the ball poorly sometimes. So that is a slight concern. But I am all about him. And you got to take a risk somewhere. You got to have a pod from time to time. Otherwise, you're just another cookie cutter side. And LDU is my guy. So I'm with him. I understand if you're not, but I'm right with him. And then we move down with a few players who just on the 1% there. And Noah Anderson. I think the only query on Anderson is, what can we get away from home? Can he get acquainted with the white shorts, Noah? Now, he has certainly shown, much like LDU, he's shown a real ability to go 150. Loves a 150. But equally, whether it's travelling and Gold Coast play poor when they travel, or he cops attention the next week and gets tagged, like, 155, then 50, then a 151, then a couple of quieter ones, then a 149, then a 55, then a 150. Like, it's insane, the up and down nature. Now, is that them just going home then away, home then away? I assume he gets some tags within these games. You can dig deeper into that if you'd like. I really do feel like, he's 24. Players, as they get older and mature and work out their game, they do become better at finding consistency away from home and coping with more attention. And he should get a bit more help, hopefully, from a guy like Rowell, just helping him around the stoppage. Feels like he's their main man. He did, jump up to his highest career average of 106. I think he's a pretty good pick. Like, I wouldn't talk you out of it. Not at all. I think if you like Noah Anderson, then go for it. Like, I don't know if he can go 115 this year, but I think you could give it a nudge. I think there'll be a year where we go, yeah, Noah Anderson, what a year. That was a fantastic season. He's averaged 116 or 113. So, yeah, certainly got the game to really damage. So I can see the interest. But not for me this year, but can certainly see the thought. Now, Tom Liberatore in 4% of sides. I've been through this one a couple of times on different formats and different times, but I think the train of thought is, no Treloar, no Bont. Like, Libba's just he's the man in there. How much, he's going to get so much possession, but how much more time can he get in there? Last year, and I've been through these stats, but last year, 72% centre bounce attendance. Only the very top mids will get 80%, like the ones who are in there all the time, 80%. So maybe Libba gets 6 to 8% extra centre bounce time, which might be a couple, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe extra centre bounces. So, and that's in the early stages of the year. I'm looking at it historically. I just think he's a guy that averages low to mid 100s, which is fine. He's a contested beast, loves to tackle, but all right, we had 2023, but in and around that, 104, 104, 103, 106, and even he had big 2014, 110, but then even a 106. So I just feel like, all right, you might feel as if he's going to really bounce back to some of his best. I feel like on top of that, you've got to bring into calculations the head knocks, because he has to be susceptible to that. He's more of a chance than some other mids that we could pick to missing games with the head knock. So I just feel like, yeah, there's a potential that he really takes the reins, particularly in the first month or so, as their number one inside mid and just has huge clearance and tackle numbers. Yeah, definite chance. But I think history tells us that he's probably going to average 105, give or take, which just isn't enough for me. But you can let me know if you disagree. Next up, we have Chad Warner, who's also in 4% of teams, but I just don't see it. I think there's a bit of a feel around Warner as a guy that just has this high ceiling and that, which he does. He often plays in real hot patches and spurts throughout a season, and I just don't think has that 110 consistency in him, because he is also a bit susceptible to the tag. Now, he's off to a pretty good start, 115 in opening round, but I don't know, he's gone 96, 100 and 104 basically. But we see big fluctuations in his game. Look, you can mount the case he's not even 24 yet, so maybe there's still time for him to really improve. And like we said with Anderson, find a way to cope with the tag. Maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical there, but 170, 144, but then 98, 64, 72, 89, and then he picks it up late again with some big scores. So I think that's a bit of a consistent theme to his game. When he goes big, and he can kick goals, and he can be really dynamic. But I'm just not feeling, and I can't see where he finds 7 or 8 extra points. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's a difficult jump to go from early 100s to 110, and we see even someone like Libba has only really been able to do it once or twice over his whole career. So, yeah, there's always a chance that someone like Warner could have a stellar season, All-Australian, average 112, but I think it could be hard trying to pick it and trying to pinpoint it, and I sort of feel like off the back of 2 shocker grand finals, how do Sydney respond? Do they just completely fall away? Are they as driven as ever? I'm finding it hard to place them. So in amongst with the bye, like we said with Heeney, I'm happy to skip on Warner. Petracca, I quite like actually. Now he's someone that we've seen average great numbers. He's got the runs on the board. My initial drawback was the way last year sort of panned out was not just an injury, but a traumatic event for Petracca, and I wondered how it would affect him on the field and mentally. And then he had a bit of a setback, I think, with the ribs during this pre-season, but did not seem to affect him because he came out and looked fantastic in the practice game. Just dominated. So the runs are on the board for him because he's gone 119, 112, 111, 117. And of course, last year was a 103, but sub-affected game. This was, I think, before half-time or just after half-time. I reckon he was on about 60 at half-time. Then he came back and just wasn't right. So, all things being equal, that last year's average is a bit unfair on him. So he is, at his best, one of the most watchable, dynamic players in the game, both in the clearance and forward of centre. That might be another drawback, is that Melbourne are just desperately trying to find someone to be a threat forward of the ball. And does it end up being Petracca? And I know he has found ways to hit the scoreboard and still score pretty well, even as a forward. But I don't want it to be something that happens too much. They do have a bit of options in that midfield, with Langford, and even if they put Rivers in there, I think there's a world and certainly some games where they'll try Petracca in there for extended period of times in the forward line, which is not what we want. It's a stressful watch. So you're definitely getting him unders for what he could be at his best, but I guess you just got to throw into everything, throw everything into that melting pot of like injury, coming back from, not just the injury, but a real falling out of love with Melbourne as a club, and then of course the role also. Probably for me, there's too much going on there, so I'm happy to go elsewhere, but I certainly see the appeal with someone like Petracca. Jordan Dawson, again, I can certainly see that. Looked fantastic in their Pracky game against Brisbane. Someone that we've seen go 110 plus. I think it was 116, I reckon. Basically 116 and a 109. So I think we could mount a reasonable case to say that 2024 was a bit of an off year. Tough year for the Crows. Just didn't seem at his best at all, Dawson. I just wonder whether he was carrying something. I can't remember if I've made that up or if I did actually hear that. But yeah, really slow start to the year. Found some form through the mid-patch and ended the season pretty well too. But yeah, 102. Again, a bit like Petracca. I think it's unders. I think he's certainly a guy that they will play forward at times. I think he's falling into that mould of Horne-Francis, Will Day, Jordan Dawson, that they'll rest forward, which I don't think is a disaster, particularly when you can. I think he kicked 2 goals against Brizzy, so he can be a threat forward. But yeah, you just don't want him there for too long going cold. But yeah, I could see the merit in someone like Jordan Dawson. I think you're getting him a little bit unders for what he can produce at his very best. Matt Rowell, it's a no thanks for me. Just does not win enough of the footy. Yes, he'll have those days where he has double-figure clearances, double-figure tackles, but I just can't trust him. And I've lived this experience. I've had him. And it is a tough watch. He is always in the thick of it from stoppage to stoppage. But once it exits that stoppage, he looks slow. Like, he is a tough watch. I mean, some of these numbers early were just fantastic. And he was finding ways to win heaps of the ball. But then in the latter stages of the year, just struggling to get anything over like 20-odd touches. You know, he had back-to-back 30s here and had good scores. It's a pretty good last 5 weeks. But, gee, this patch through here was a shocker. Absolute shocker. So, I just can't trust him. I just get the sense that he probably falls in that Tom Liberatore category also. I think we've seen 2 years of 102. And I reckon that's about where he belongs. 102 to 106. Might have that All-Australian year that we talk about, that fantastic season where he does go to 112. You know, of course, players of Rowell's ilk can do that. I'm not going to say he's never going to do it, but if we're playing the odds here, you got Rowell at 102, Dawson at 102. Who's a better chance to go 110 plus? Most clearly Dawson, if you ask me. He's got those weapons. He can hit the scoreboard. He's got that beautiful left boot. Rowell has his strengths, but it's not that. So for me, it's pretty clear that I would prefer someone like Dawson. Horne-Francis we touched on in the forwards. Holmes we touched on in the backs. Rozee, yeah, he's one to talk about. I think he's really come into calculations after Port Adelaide. Not only did Butters go out, but Rozee put on a clinic against the Saints. Now, maybe I'm being harsh on him, but I just feel like he is not equipped to handle the tag, and I just think he's going to cop some serious attention. I think if Butters was there to maybe protect him, I mean, you could argue that Horne-Francis gets real frustrated. Maybe Horne-Francis is the one that cops attention. They get under his skin, but there's something in his makeup and his game style. Like, I don't see him as a contested beast. He's more of that fleet of foot, bounces around the pack, sidestep, crafty guy, which, you know, we can certainly see players of his quality and similar style break tags and be dynamic, and we've seen him be pretty dangerous up forward. But it's just a gut feel one. It's just a gut feel one. We're looking at that price. We need him to go 110, and we're kind of asking him to go into uncharted waters. Last year was disappointing. I don't know whether he struggled with the captaincy or not, but I feel like, would he go from 107? Yeah, 107 down to 98. I don't know. I'm just not sold on it. I just don't know if he is the guy to be a 110er. I'm not sure. We know what he can do because I saw him, I think it was gather round. Saw him up close against the Bombers. Insane game. Like, insane. His breakaway speed and just, he's dynamic at his best. But maybe it's a gut feel. I don't have a stack of evidence to say against it, but something says to me he is easily shut down by a tagger. Am I making that up? I don't know. Maybe. But let me know your thoughts. If you're a Port fan, let me know. Also, if you're a Port fan, let me know what Josh Sinn's going to do. I'm very interested to see what he does, but that's a different topic. So, he is a really interesting guy. I'm not sure how to place him. All right, we'll continue to go down the list, and we're starting to get more into that mid-price category, under 500k, and here is Will Day. And I cannot tell you how much it frustrates me to see him at 33%. Because before he went nuts, I've been on him. I've been on him all pre-season. Made multiple videos, and he was on, I think it was 17%, maybe 18% before the game. And I thought, just don't be best on, mate. I said it in my preview. Just don't dominate. Just play well. Don't make everyone jump on board. Now he's in about double the teams as he was. So, yeah, I know people have outlined to me, oh, mate, he's not a pod. 17% isn't a pod, but kind of is. Like, anything under 20% is a bit different to the rest of the comp because there's a lot of players in 25% and above teams. So I felt that I had a unique type, not a pod, but a unique type of premium, and he came out, dominated, 3 goals in the first half. Yes, there's the counter-attack of he was tagged out in the second game. Again, had a little corky, bit of a niggle. You know, it raises concerns about his body again, which some people do worry about. But I'm too far in, mate. I am far too deep into the Will Day bandwagon that there's no way I could jump off, and certainly not after a game where he nearly scores 150. So, nothing really more I can say that you didn't know after seeing him dominate on Friday night footy. Does hurt me a bit like Callaghan. I was tossing and turning. You would have seen him in one of my sides, which we'll talk about him in a sec. It'd be interesting. Last I checked, he was in 12%. I wonder if we've had a few more jump on over the weekend. But yeah, Will Day, certified star, looking great. Now, Josh Daicos, 3% of teams, and a lot of people will be looking really fondly on that halfback role, and I do like him. I think the role's going to be really good. Be interesting to see how he and Houston really combine across the whole season. Maybe just a smidgen expensive. I suppose what people are looking for is if we were getting Daicos as a defender at 480, we would pick him. So maybe that's what people are looking at it for. Probably for me, I've just preferred to go with Day and Ashcroft, Callaghan, etc. So, yeah, I do think Daicos is a pretty good pick, and I feel like 3% is maybe disrespectful, but he'll have a really good start to the year, I dare say. I reckon he'll be averaging mid-90s, maybe high 90s, and he'll get dual position status, and he'll be in the mix for a top 8 to 10 defender, I reckon. So there's good merit behind the thinking. I've just probably preferred other options that I think could jump to 105, 110, like a Will Day. So that's probably my approach there, but I think he is in for a pretty good season. D'Ambrosio, yeah, I've had a few people talk about him, and look, there's nothing I can say to really knock him, but I just don't think there's too many wingmen that we pick at that price, and at that price he's got to lift it to close to 110. Did have a good game, you know, again a solid game last night or Friday night. He only had 19. Okay. Felt like he had more watching it. But good year last year. There's not too many wingmen that average close to 110. There's not many that average 100. So it's just he just doesn't have the scope at that price. He's a nice ball user. He finds space. Had a good preseason, but he's a wingman. And they just historically aren't guys that we pick at that price. So I'm going to have to pass on D'Ambrosio there. Trent Rivers, we talked more about in the defence, so feel free to go over to the backline video there if you would like. Clayton Oliver, don't have to talk much about him. He's quite clearly a lock. We know his history, both on the field and off the field, and everything this preseason he's done has gone to sort of suggest that he is looking like he's getting back to close to his best sort of stuff. No way do I see him averaging 120 again. But I tell you what, at that price, anything around 105, 110 would be fantastic. And his hands look good. He looks fit. Gee, they're telling us how fit he is, isn't he? He does look like he's back training, back doing what he loves, playing footy. So hopefully we'll reap the rewards in SuperCoach. He is looking pretty good. Adam Cerra. I really like Cerra, actually. The only downside for me would be the body. So he had a great preseason game. I think he scored maybe 90 or something in about half a game. It was something like that. Really good game. We'll probably check that in a second. And we've seen him average good numbers before. Had that 108. It's just 17, 18, 18, 19, 12. And the type of injuries are ones that can just really reoccur, which worries me. He's always had a little interruption to his year, hasn't he? So he's had a good preseason. So it's not to say he could change. And I think it's pretty much just Cripps and Walsh ahead of him. Maybe George Hewitt gets a bit of centre bounce time too. But he scored 108 from 50%, 57%. So that's pretty good numbers there. Starting on the ball. He's a likely type. He is a likely type. I think he knows how to find the footy. Sort of reminds me... There's a little bit of Serong about him, just the way, I know he's a former Docker as well, but it's just something that reminds me about the way he goes about it. Sort of goes about his work quietly, but then he's had 18 by half time, and it's just a matter of if he can get that body right. And he's actually quite popular, 12%. I reckon last time I checked it was 4 or 5. So he's convinced a few over the preseason, and I don't blame you. I think roll the dice at that price on the body could really reap the rewards, but look, we talk about Baker in the forward line, and wow, there you go. Callaghan is 18%. So here's two of my boys, Callaghan and Ashcroft. The only reason I don't have Cerra at the moment is because of these two boys. I think they will go bigger and better than Cerra. But starting with Callaghan, wow, again, it was just the game over the weekend, wasn't it? He was skirting around packs, linking up, kicking goals from outside 50, 3 possessions in one play, slotting the goal from a tight little angle. He's a former pick 3, smooth mover, big-bodied type of mid-2. Tom Green's out, so it gives him opportunity in the guts. He took it with both hands. And I don't think it changes too much once Green returns anyway. I think we see a lot of opportunity opening up without Peatling in that midfield. And also I feel like Cornelio is really taking a backward step. So he was really a non-factor in the guts. 2 clearances, 11 touches. I just feel like his body's probably got the best of him and he's going to just slowly creep towards the end of his career. I think that midfield is now Kelly, Callaghan and Green. I think that's the way we'll see it. Bedford in there as a tagger. So I can really see him having a great season. I was umming and ahhing about, am I being too reactive to a big score in opening round? But maybe, but I feel like it's worth rolling the dice. I mean, it's not like this is just some random guy that's had a big game. He's a high pick, someone we've talked about the last couple of pre-seasons about being a potential breakout, and he showed us exactly why the other day. So I reckon I'm on board. I'll have a think about it, but I reckon I'm on board. And Will Ashcroft, well, I don't have to think about that. I've been on board for the whole pre-season. He hasn't left my side. Maybe there was a period of time early when there was a bit of talk about how he was progressing. There was something he had early in the preseason, like early days, might have been December, but once he's been through that main group, it was just the back end of last year. We know he won the Norm Smith, but there were a lot of good games in there, pretty much from round 22. This patch of games, he averaged 107 with some big games, consistent games, even 15 marks. This kid just finds space, and I think, we see what Callaghan can do with his long-running goals and smooth moving. I think we'll be linking those types of plays with Ashcroft as well, but just the follow-up 1-2 handball, turning one touch into 2. He'll do that regularly. I think he's gone past McCluggage as an on-baller at Brisbane. I think it's probably Neale, Dunkley and Ashcroft in a lot of centre bounces. So I am really optimistic of where this kid goes. I think we talk about guys like Daicos and Sheasel, and I'll put Ashcroft into that similar category. Yes, he's been a bit behind them because of the ACL, but I am red hot on him. I think he could just take the comp by storm, all things being equal, and he gets a go at it with the body. I genuinely feel like he's averaging 107, 108. I think it's a great pick at the price. So let me know your thoughts with Wilbur. I mean, there's a few mid-price guys that sometimes makes us nervous, but we've had a lot of premiums go down with injury. I'm seeing some value in these mid-prices, and yeah, I've certainly got Ashcroft, and I'll ponder on Callaghan. Harley Reid is the next guy on the list, 7% of teams, but probably someone that I feel like we'll be in that best player of the competition category at some point, similar to Ashcroft, but just not this year. I just don't know. Like, you look at Will Ashcroft, and he's always had that knack of winning a lot of possession and just finds those little handballs. He accumulates, finds heaps of the footy. Reid's more of like that impact player, sort of a Dangerfield, Horn Francis. I just feel like it'll be... He doesn't get as much easy ball, and I think he's also carrying a big weight on his shoulders at West Coast. You know, Ashcroft's still got that buffer of Neale, and Callaghan still has Green and Kelly. You look at Reid, and it's pretty much just Tim Kelly, but they're all going to come for Harley Reid anytime they think about tagging. And I still just think he's finding his game as a player, and just around the consistency. So he'll have some huge games. I think these numbers go up. I definitely think he averages something in the 90s, but it's just not going to be enough. I think there's better options around the price. Look, perfect scenario is Harley Reid has a reasonable year, cops a few tags, builds his tank, averages 91, and we can launch at him next year, because then he could be really in the range to go Caleb Serong sort of 90 up to 110. But I just don't think it's this year. I think there's just too many factors around the attention he'll get, and just developing as a footballer. He's a different type of player to someone like Ashcroft. So I get the rage, but I'm happy to pass. It would be unprecedented to see him go nuts in his second year. Now, Simpkin we talked about in the forwards, but it's a no thanks. Bolton we talked about in the forwards. Lipinski forwards. Smith forwards. Trying to not double up on some of the discussion points. Peatling, interesting one here. So will get good opportunity at the Crows. What he will get is opportunity in the middle. Half forward flank, push up to the stoppage, occasional centre bounce. Loves the tackle. Looked good against Brizzy in the practice. I don't know. The reason he's left my team is I think I've probably felt like paying an extra 100k for someone like Ashcroft or Callaghan, who I feel like averages 105, maybe 110, is better than someone like Peatling, who, we save a bit of cash, but I feel like best case is probably 95. And if I'm giving my estimate, it's around 90, which is still bloody good for a bloke at that price. Like, that'll make us some nice cash. So I think for me, I like him. I think he's a good player. I like what he brings to the Crows. I don't think he'll have bulk CBAs, because they do have a lot running through there with Dawson, Rankin, Soligo. They still like Crouch. Like, he's probably 5th or 6th in line, but he should get opportunity. Jeez, I might need an opportunity for a drink of water. But I don't know if it's for my team. It's probably just a structure call. If this works in nicely and saving 100k helps you elsewhere and you like the overall look of your team, I think he's a good pick. But just for me, I'm probably paying up towards a Callaghan or an Ashcroft or even a Cerra for me. Parker we talked about in the forwards, as did Sanders. I think a lot of these will probably be guys we talked about in the forwards as well. Isaac Cumming, 3% of sides. Look, there's definitely possibility, and I think we like that he's averaged 9 in the past, but just haven't seen enough from him in the pre-season. It was interrupted with a hamstring concern. Came back, played, looked okay. I don't think it's going to be half back. He might be in the back 6. He might be on a wing, but he's certainly not the main distributor out of the back line like he once was at the Giants, which gave him the good scores. So don't be fooled by what he has done in the past. I don't think he's an option that we should pursue this year. And there might not be too many others. Obviously, Daniel we talked about in the forwards. Garcia we talked in the forwards, but I really like him. And then we're probably getting into rookie territory. Lawler, obviously, we don't need to be picking because of the head knock and all that sort of stuff. But that is the midfielders. So in terms of structure, I think go 1, maybe 2 big dogs. But honestly, there is some serious value in the mid price, and I know I'm a bit of an advocate for the mid price, and it comes with risk, no doubt about that. But I'm liking it. I'm liking the way the side looks with a few of these guys, and we've been waiting for Ashcroft. We've been waiting for Callaghan. Maybe they're here. Maybe they're ready to rock and roll. So it's all about picking that breakout. Let's see if we can. But would love your thoughts. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.